Will Steve Rogers be able to end the supernatural threat of the Emissary and put to bed a decades-old blood feud? Well, let's hop into the pages of Captain America issue number 6, the grand finale of this inaugural J. Michael Straczynski cap arc, and find out what happens next together, shall we? So then, as we join this story, Steve Rogers once again waxes poetically about the march of history. He talks about how culture tends to move in tides, with changes people ever rarely seem to recognize while they're in it. History might not always repeat itself, but it always rhymes, case in point. People willing to dilute themselves give in to hate if it means standing next to some sort of power like they did during the big Madison Square bombing. Luckily, Steve Rogers and his like-minded allies were there to fight the good fight and push back the forces of evil in those days as in the future. Captain America and his friends once again stand united and resolute, trying to protect a room full of innocent peace conference goers from the wrath of the evil demonic force known as the Emissary, a villain who was sure to manipulate the Madison Square Garden bombing all those years ago from the shadows, and who is now once again returned to try and make Captain America's life hell. But how exactly did Steve and Meyer Lansky stop the Madison Square Garden bombing back during the day? Well, it seems after running off the German-American bun, they managed to track down the armored car holding the explosives. Unfortunately, no one could actually get in it except for Steve himself, mainly because he was so small, so skinny, and so sickly, he was able to just slide on in an open window. Of course, capturing the bomb is only one part of the battle, disposing it is a whole other. Young Steve heroically elects to drive away the explosive device to an uninhabited part of New Jersey, even though in doing so he's basically signing up for a suicide mission. Sadly, in the future, things are seeming pretty damn suicidal too. Despite his best efforts, Captain America just cannot stand against the magical might that the Emissary is packing. Luckily, it's at this point the little talking Doctor Strange doll that Cap had picked up in the previous issue is finally able to chime on in with an idea. If Steve's enemy is magical, and if the threat really is this bad, it means that the only way Captain America will be able to stand against Asmodeus's Emissary is if he's packing the Eye of Agamotto. And just like that, in his moment of need, the Shield of Agamotto is born. At first, Cap isn't exactly sure about having an occult symbol on such a piece of Americana, only for Strange to remind him, hey, you know what's on the dollar bill, right? Alright, fair point. And as the tide begins to turn for the heroes in the present, in the past, the same happened for Steve. He managed to dump the exploding van in the water, and just narrowly managed to escape himself. In fact, his last few moments before he thought he was going to die drifted back to his mother, because, well, he really did truly think he was set to join her in only a matter of moments. Now, with the Shield of Agamotto on his side, Steve is finally able to take the fight directly to the Emissary. His hits now actually hurt him, and while he's still unable to actually slay the demon at the center of the Emissary, Asmodee, he is actually able to exorcise him from his serial killer host, meaning that it'll be a long while before he's able to ensnare another individual to his liking once this conspiracy has already been broken wide open. Now, it's right around here the story actually gets really interesting. You see, we flash back once again and we see what became of Steve after he managed to drag himself out of the water. He got brought to a hospital by Lansky, wherein the doctors were finally able to look him over and really examine all of young Steve Rogers' many health problems, and the doctor's prognosis is, well, none of this is very good. In fact, in his medical opinion, between his asthma, his fainting spells, and all of the dirty water that he ended up drinking when he fell into the water, he's got maybe about 5 years tops to live. Now that's pretty bad news, but what Steve didn't actually know back then is that Asmodee's host had actually zeroed in on him with a sniper rifle. He was about to take the shot and end Cap's life right there. Only, get this, the demon stayed his hand that day, saying that having Steve Rogers die of sickness, alone, unloved, and ultimately forgotten by history would be a much crueler form of torture and revenge than just shooting him here and now would ever be. Because surely Steve Rogers from Brooklyn only got lucky this day, right? And it's not like he's ever going to go on to do anything important in the future ever. Wow, isn't this demon's face red now? I mean, it's probably always red because he's a demon, but still, wow, way to underestimate Steve and pay the price not once but twice in as many decades. It's with that the story finally begins winding down and coming full circle. Steve finally opens back up his apartment building with the help of his Korean contractor friend, who ultimately decides to not stay in the city and not take Steve up on his offer to be the acting manager of the new building. At first he says it's only because he's got family in Seattle, and that there's a good school for his daughter. It's one of the other neighbors who has to tell Steve the real reason why this guy didn't want to stay in New York, and that is because of a bunch of very unfortunate and very hateful Nazi graffiti left on the same block where this dude parked his work truck. Obviously, Steve jumps right into action to try and paint over this stuff, while also reiterating his line from the beginning of the book, how history moves in waves. Terrible people will always want to try and stand next to power even when it's actively eating them up from the inside, but that there'll also always be people willing to try and defend peace. And that if any modern day Nazi ever thinks about starting any trouble, there'll always be a Captain America there to stop them. And so that was Captain America issue number 6, everybody, and overall I thought this was a pretty damn strong finale to this first Straczynski Cap arc. On one hand, it was very high concept, what with the telling a story in 2 different timelines, that managed to reflect, play off, and reinforce each other, while also telling a story about Captain America fighting a magical villain, and having to get outside his own comfort zone to properly confront them. More than anything, though, what I think I really like about this story, and the thing that's going to actually stick with me long after it's over, is how Straczynski basically frames young Steve Rogers' sickness as one of the best things that ever happened to him. It was something that made him really respect and appreciate the time he had on Earth, but also something that made all of the antagonists in his life always end up underestimating him until the day he finally met Erskine, a man who was able to see the greatness that was always in Steve Rogers when few other people actually could. I don't know what Straczynski has planned for the Star-Spangled Man beyond this first story, but I'll definitely be interested to see where we're going. I think this 6-issue arc is one of those really great standalone pieces that you could very easily give to any comic book fan out there, or someone who's just really interested into getting into Captain America, and I think they'd manage to have a really good time with it. Overall, I would give this one a solid 8.5 out of 10. Just a good, consistent comic from start to finish with a really strong and really relevant message.
Hey there everyone, it's your old pal Cape Joel again, thanking you so much for watching to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, why not check out my Amazon link down in the description. Yes, that's right, the Cape Joel channel officially has its own Amazon storefront now. You can pick up a comic or anything else for that matter, and if you did, you'd really be helping me in the channel. So with that out of the way everyone, I will see you again next time. Bye-bye.